resource from a good...
Hi, I'm Bob Lepine. It's no news to you, I'm sure, that in the last 40 years, the American family has faced an unrelenting attack. The enemy has assaulted from every angle. It's more important now than ever to turn to God's plan for defending and repairing the family. And that's why Family Life Today is so committed to providing practical, encouraging help straight from God's Word. Join us each weekday right here for Family Life Today.
Weeknights at 9 Central on AFR, American Family Radio.
Welcome to the Harry Jackson Show. I'm your host, Harry Jackson. Today we're going to talk a little bit about economics, and not just the national economics, but in this unique season in which we all have got to be putting things together for taxes. We're going to talk about tax preparation, tax returns, but more importantly, we'll talk about what we want to do with those taxes. But first, I want to talk to you about the top 5 websites for cheap gas in our nation. And I think this could really help us. You know, one of the challenges we have in this season is that there's a concerted effort by many in our public lives to push us into trading from whatever kind of fuel sources you use to cleaner and cleaner fuel sources, and in your house, in our industries, and then also to raise the cost of gasoline per gallon as a way of forcing conservation. So I do think that some of the price escalation we've experienced is part and parcel of a normal growth of the economy. Some of it, however, is in fact this green strategy that has gotten in and is trying to force us to do what they think is going to be a good thing. First website I wanted to give you is fuelmeup.com. And this website features the best gas prices nationwide. Enter the city, state, and zip code closest to you for results as close as 1 mile away from your location. And I believe that this is very significant for us. Recently, the site located in Cranston, Rhode Island, a $3.11 per gallon price on regular gas. And that sounds of interest to me. I don't know that I want to drive to Rhode Island to achieve the savings, however. Second website is gasbuddy.com. And similar to the other one, you select the state you're in and then enter your zip code for current gas prices in your area. Then you can find them or friend these people really on Facebook for the latest news on gas prices across the country. The way you reach them is http www.facebook.com / I guess that is, Gas Buddy. Facebook.com / Gas Buddy. Third website is MapQuest.com. Not only do you get to get a map showing you where the stations are specifically, you get a complete list of gas prices in your area. So this is great for those of us who have MapQuest on our smartphones or on our iPad minis. We can just reach out and get this information. Fourth, there's gaspricewatch.com, and it's consistently updated with current gas prices by zip code. And then finally, last but not least, fueleconomy.gov. Fueleconomy.gov. And this links to current gas prices and the data state by state. Also, there are a couple of iPhone apps or Droid apps, and that would be Cheap Gas, ! And the iPhone app is free and provides users with the best gas prices in their area as well as a map. Then there's Gas Buddy Android app. And you put all those together, it's a great opportunity for us actually to save money. One last thought before we go to a great guest that is in our studio with us. He's going to talk to us more about specifics of preparing taxes and getting them ready. We really have heard that it's very, very important that we safeguard our refund, or specifically our refund check, by choosing direct deposit as opposed to choosing to send it snail mail. If you're living in the Washington, D.C. area, and it's probably true of many, many other areas, we have got an amazing amount of credit card, identity fraud, and theft that is happening around us. A few years ago, my wife's identity was stolen. People had sent in for credit cards that were delivered back at her post office. Our post office back in those days, or post box, forgive me, on the street post box. Things came from the post office to the post box. Our post box was right off the street. We lived on a site in which the church was going to build eventually. And so literally, you're about 100 yards away from our little mailbox. And so we had people doing all kinds of things, and they filled in applications for debt. And when the credit cards came, they picked up the credit cards and went off and used them. Yeah, it's a little shocking. So we really know what it means to have your identity stolen. And so the idea that a refund check could be stolen certainly is not beyond the pale of reality as far as I'm concerned. So direct deposit is fast, it's easy, it's safe. It's the best way to receive your tax refund. And whether you file electronically or on paper, direct deposit gives you access to refund faster than any paper check. And then there are two major reasons that more than 80 million taxpayers chose direct deposit in 2012. Number one is security, and the second is convenience. Security is that every year the U.S. Postal Service runs thousands of paper checks to the IRS, and they return them to them as undeliverable. And that's a lot of checks. And so direct deposit eliminates the possibility of a lost or stolen or undeliverable refund check. We've heard of someone who last year the refund check was lost in the mail. There's some scam involved, it looks like. And it took them months to get that refund check. And if you're like me, as soon as you find out when you're going to get it, I start thinking about how I'm going to invest it. Well, really spend it. But I was going to fake it for a minute, act like I had become more advanced, like Mr. Fleming wants me to be. And obviously with the convenience is obviously their direct deposit. Mr. James Fleming, talk to us a little bit about some of the things you would do in this tax season to make things go smoother with regard to tax preparation and what we should do with our monies.
Thank you, Bishop. Go smoother. I like that idea. And because I am so pushed and pressed for time a lot of times during tax season. And one of the worst things that can happen to me is for someone to walk in with a shoebox full of receipts. So the
Don't talk about my family like that. That's us. That's us.
So you resemble that remark.
I resemble that remark, yes, sir.
So the biggest thing with any tax return is organization. Organization of all of your documents. The better organized that you are, the better I can get your return prepared. Okay, or any preparer can get your return prepared. There's so much that can be missed. So we typically use some type of tax organizer as a way of being sure that all the documents that we're going to need to help you at this point are there and available. So if we can get people to be more organized the day that they walk in, if they're going to bring them in or if they're going to send documents to me by fax or email, however I get those documents, and a lot of people do that. A lot of times people, because of the electronic age, don't really come to see me. They'll send their documents to me. But even with that, stuff can get missed. And especially also if your tax situation has changed during the year. If there's been a change in your filing status, if there's been a change in your job, those types of things, a lot of times those generate different documents.
Wow. Okay. So some of the information can be missing. I got you. How do we know what kinds of deductions to take? Are there rules of thumb, or you just kind of go by historic pattern? Everybody's talking about we need to reform the tax laws.
Absolutely.
But fat chance anytime soon. We can't even agree that what we're going to do with the taxes. I'm not so sure we're going to reform the tax laws in the next few years, but what approach should they take to this whole area?
Again, it's a matter of organization, and if your situation has changed during the year, go in to see your preparer.
Okay.
And have him literally walk through. I literally do an interview with especially my new clients, and then if someone has been with me a couple of years, I'll have them also come back in. Let's talk about what has changed in your life. What more things can we do? What have you done? And I try to encourage all my clients, if anything happens during the year that you think is going to affect your taxes, call me. Don't let it go through the entire year. And we get to the end. I can't work miracles. So, the sooner that I know, the sooner I can advise you in order to make a difference in your tax situation.
Okay, we're going to come back to you and ask for a list of some things people may want to look for as high priorities.
Good.
Places where people might be able to save some money. And we're also going to talk more about investment toward the end. This is very, very critical. I believe the opportunity for unique businesses is greater now than it's ever been in American history. Service businesses, people don't want to do them. For example, I get food shipped to me now from out of state just to keep up with my diet. I'm not only trying to lose weight, but in my wife's dealing with cancer, she's not, and my family is not just preparing meals the way they once might have done. And there's a whole cottage industry that you could run out of a church. Pastors could empower folks to operate in that could make some handsome money for the chefs and entrepreneurs who cook food in the ministry. I have part ownership in a suit company. We're just really getting up, clothing company, up to speed, and we're going to be taking a spring trip. We've got folks who are put these things together, made to measure suits, and we actually have a huge manufacturer who's going to carry our suit line across the United States, and we're going to call the low end of it Resurrection Wear. Have a little faith orientation there. But in that particular industry, people want service, and we find that there are a lot of folk who want to have great clothing, and they don't want to pay a lot of money for it, but you can't get into some of the things that are going to multiply your money unless you got a nest egg, and if you can't get a nest egg by frugally saving money or how we get maybe some funds from these tax returns, it kind of keeps us kind of stuck in a certain place. 1 minute before the break, Pastor Rudy, can you give us any help about your approach to taxes? And then when we come back, we're going to tackle some of these things a little bit more in depth.
Well, my basic approach is just to keep good records, to just all through the year. I kind of try to set my tax situation up on a monthly basis, so at the end of the year I kind of have things in order. I sort of ready for the TurboTax software, just plug things in. The other thing is I try to look at what I can do during the year with respect to receiving income. Sometimes deferred income is possible during the time when my income is high. Deferred income received to the next year, so when the income might be lower. And secondly, it gets back to this thing of a saving. Just try to live so that I'll have some savings in place so that when opportunities come, which there are many, as Bishop just said, during this season, I can make additional investments when the opportunity comes around.
Well, that's an opening salvo. It's very, very good. We've only got a few seconds. In the book of Jeremiah, chapter 17, one of the blessings of the Lord to faithful people is that God will open our eyes to opportunities so that he can release blessing to us. Stay tuned.
Hope. It's a word that defines a feeling of longing or anticipation for an expected end. It can be positive when we hope for something good, or it can be negative when we don't have much hope that anything good will come. Sadly, hope can also be lost completely. Have you been hoping and searching for something good to come along? Maybe you've turned to alcohol or drugs as your source of hope, only to be disappointed. Maybe you thought you could fulfill that anticipation by being popular and diving into every fad that came along, but they only caused your hope to fail or for you to lose hope altogether. We're born into sin, and it's only natural for us to place our hope in the things that please our sin nature. But Psalm 146 tells us, "Blessed is he whose help is the God of Jacob, whose hope is in the Lord his God." The freedom you hope for can only be found in freedom from sin, and that only comes through salvation in Jesus Christ. You can have your hope restored today. Get the answers at knowhim.afr.net. knowhim.afr.net.
Hey, we're Casting Crowns.
And we know firsthand how destructive drug and alcohol abuse can be, but we also know that there is a way out.
My wife and kids had been gone for weeks, but it never really hit me how much my drinking had cost me until I woke up from an alcoholic-induced blackout on the kitchen floor in an empty house. The only evidence of even having a family was a few toys scattered on the floor. My name's Brian. When I first came into Teen Challenge, I was just trying to get my old life back when I suddenly realized that Jesus is who he says he is. And he reached in and changed my heart, and he changed my life.
If you or a loved one is struggling with an addiction, don't give up. Teen Challenge has helped thousands of teens and adults find true freedom through the power of Jesus Christ. You can find more information at 417-581-2181 or online at teenchallengeusa.com. You're listening to American Family Radio.
Here's Dan Celia with today's Stewardship Moment.
Listen to Luke 19:12 and 13. A man of noble birth went to a distant country to have himself appointed king and then to return. So he called 10 of his servants and gave them each 10 talents. "Put this money to work," he said, "until I come back." Think of this as you continue to read. The servants, not even the unfaithful servants, ever referred to the money as his own, but always as the master's property, saying, "your talents." All of the servants freely acknowledged his master's ownership of the money. They were much like us, stewards of the master's money.
You've just heard a Stewardship Moment with Dan Celia of Financial Issues Ministry, helping you plan, give, and invest wisely. For more information, log on to financialissues.org. That's financialissues.org.
We're back with Sheila Weber and my co-host of the day, Pastor Derek McCoy, and we've been talking about the institution of marriage, and we want to pick up on something. You talked about the issue of honor right before the break, that there has to be kind of an encouragement of young men that they need to both honor the institution and the women that they are involved in. What kind of things should we be emphasizing to these, I'll say bluntly, irresponsible men or guys who have been told, protect yourselves, don't make the wrong choice, and they languish without a sense of purpose and destiny?
Well, first of all, people need to be aware that 40% of all American babies today are born outside of wedlock. And that.
Welcome back to the Harry Jackson Show. I'm your host, and we're talking about the tax man. Yeah, the tax man. Nobody really wants to hear about taxes unless they're going to get a return. But as we begin this particular segment, I want to have James Fleming share with us a little bit about the impact that paying our taxes, preparing our taxes or not, will have on our overall economy. James, what is you talked about some kind of gap in a tax?
Yes, the IRS does a study, and they have dubbed it the tax gap. And what this gap is what they expected as revenues versus what they actually received. And the most current information that they have is as of 2006. So understanding that if this is 2006 information and here we are 2013, even this is outdated. But this is the most current information that they have. They were expected $2,660 million in revenues.
Wow.
They actually collected $2,210,000,000, a gap of $450 billion. And this is attributed to non-filing, underreporting, underreporting, and underpayment of taxes. And $296 billion of this is attributed to individuals.
Oh my goodness!
Okay, not corporations or small businesses, and
Right.
individuals who have either not filed, underreported, or underpaid their taxes.
You're talking about $500 billion.
Yes, I am.
So $500 billion of the tax gap,
Yes.
which could shave our debt liability quite a bit.
Yes.
But it also shows that what Congress has been saying to us is really true as well, and that you cannot solve our problem of the deficit just by increasing taxes on the very rich by just a little bit. You can't get to $16.5 trillion by that method alone, but
No.
if you collected what you're supposed to collect every year, or let that number go up over a decade, you could do pretty good with changing some of the results.
Yeah, and something that you mentioned, if you can collect it. So understand that audits are increasing. I recently read that the IRS shifted 3,000 agents to its fraud division. It's just in order to plug that particular hole related to taxes. So audits will be increasing in order to collect these types of monies, not only with individuals but also small businesses, especially ones that are cash intensive, hair salons, barbers, home improvement contractors, or any business where there's a lot of transfer of cash that might not get reported properly or ever at all.
No, some people might not do that on purpose. I understand. Well, let's come back to you also to talk a little bit more about businesses and their taxes in the next segment. But in this segment, we'll also ask you a little bit about some of the areas in which we should really examine our tax. But first, let's go with our dear brothers. David Parlett, what is your approach to taxes? We've heard about the pass approach of the box, and he counts everything. And that sounds so simple until you start talking to him. He's got a real detailed mind. What is it that you guys do at your household and family around the tax area that would be helpful?
Well, thank you, Bishop. I agree with Dr. DePass here is keeping good, accurate records. I have about 15 separate files in different areas. So contributions would be a file, income's a file, and so I throw away all the envelopes, throw away all the unnecessary junk, and just keep a paper file along with my computer files so that I know currently where I am financially, and that way we got clean records, and it's just a very simple system that's very easy to maintain.
Good.
Well, that sounds very good as an approach in terms of data. There's some of us that get stuck in this position of trying to recreate data at the end of the year, or even some listening might be trying to make up some data. Because they're saying, my liability says I got to owe $5,000 what is it again that I'm supposed to be taking off? And you say, what are the things they should be looking for that are the most likely to yield some kind of deductible expense or help you out that you can get a refund?
Some areas that you can take a look at, in fact, I've even had this, is that I found that some people will not claim their charitable contributions. So,
oh, really?
Yeah. I had a situation where a young lady felt that she had given to the church. It was her tithes and offering, and as a result, she wouldn't claim her charitable contributions. So, as a result, I educated her a little bit about render unto Caesar was Caesar's, and when she realized that that Caesar said that you could do this, she was fine with it, and actually ended up with enough money to make a down payment on a car.
Oh, wow!
That because she had not filed it in 3 or 4 years.
So, oh my goodness! I wish you'd have to make a down payment on the preacher's car. That would have been helpful.
That's one area.
Okay.
Another area is with different industries. For instance, educators. So educators sometimes miss that they can write off expenses that they have contributed, spending, helping out in the classrooms.
Okay.
So there's an area there. The deductible IRA is still available. A lot of people are not using the IRA deductions. So,
okay.
So
individual retirement account.
Okay. Thank you. And so some people are missing that. Education credits, for instance, if you have a child or you're in school yourself and you've gotten a loan, that's obvious that you because you would get a 1098-T for that you have paid those tuitions. But there are some people who've gotten loans for tuitions and forget that, okay, wait a minute, this money was used for tuition. I need to claim that, okay, towards education credits. So those are some of the areas I think that people miss. Energy tax savings. So if you did some work in your home, you had windows, certain appliances installed, the energy tax credit is still available. And sometimes people miss that. So, but a lot of this also comes out of doing a good tax interview. And the more questions that your tax preparer asks you, and the more you know your own personal situation, the more things that can be found. And a lot of people do leave money on the table.
Well, let's take a poll, and we're going to ask this question. I'm sure people out there are wondering whether they should do their taxes themselves or not. I've got some of my family members who do their own taxes. So out of this group, how many of us, aside from Mr. Fleming, he does other people's taxes, do you all both do, it's 4 of us here, your own tax returns?
I do my own tax return, and one reason I do it is to try to keep abreast of the tax law because they change often. And so the question maybe you can answer later, to what extent should we keep abreast of what we can deduct? Because it does vary year to year. I do my own. It's tedious, but at least I save money. but it forces me to do some study of the IRS laws to see what's deductible.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's great. You have the capacity to understand the laws is a huge thing. As far as I'm concerned, they are changing. Do you do your own taxes as well, David Parlett?
I'll just say my wife, before we got married, she would always do all her own taxes, and so our tax preparer said I should really turn my stuff over to her since she is so good at this. But as a married couple, we take our work to a tax preparer.
I see. And why did you swap up when you got married? You just didn't want any conflict?
That's part. that's true. It's better to have peace in the house. But because my situation's a little different than even what she had done in the past, because now we have a combined family situation. So it's just better to take it to someone a little more knowledgeable.
Yeah. So how many kids altogether do you all have?
Between us, we have 5 that have flown the nest.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. So it's a lot, and now the grandkids are starting to come this direction.
Yes, sir.
And so I sent out my tax preparation to someone else for years. I used H&R Block. I would recommend them or Mr. Fleming here to do taxes. My thought was if something really bad goes on, I want them to go talk to them, not me. I don't want to go through all the hassles. So that creates a safeguard.
Yes, it does.
And you know that they may press the envelope, but they're not going to go too far because they have guarantees, corporate policies, a number of things. It's always good to have another set of eyes watching over whatever you put together. So that worked very, very well for me, just getting someone else to prepare them and showing up to pick them up. Why would you say, as a tax preparer yourself, people should consider having their taxes done for hire, for pay, by someone else?
A lot of the reason that I would consider is, one, the separating you from the IRS if something comes up, just as you mentioned. The other thing is that if your tax situation changes and suddenly there's more complexity to your return than had been in the past, be it you've decided to start a business, you've had some other investments, you've started with rental property. All those things can be very, very confusing and complicated where the tax laws are concerned. And if you're not familiar with that, you'll either leave money on the table and not get a larger refund, or find yourself missing something and end up owing. So if your situation is fairly simple, or like Dr. DePass, you don't mind digging into the arcane subjects of tax laws and tax law changes, so then, do your own. And I've taught a lot of people, too, with very simple situations. I'll charge them $25 and say, now next time you can do it on your own.
Wow.
I've done that. Well, especially for students, who really have very simple situations. Okay, I charge them $25 for a 1040 easy and say, you'll never do this again.
Well, that's very interesting because there is a lot of complexity, and it's certainly worth more than 25. But thank you for what you bring to the table and helping people. Right now would be a great time for you to share your website with people.
Thank you. The website is Fleming, Fleming, financialsolutions.com. FlemingFinancialSolutions.com.
All right. So I think that's a really great resource. Let's go back and talk a little bit more about taxes, investment, and we're going to shift also to the issue of saving and amassing wealth. And I'm concerned that so much of what we do when we talk about budgeting of necessity deals with cutting costs. But how does one increase income? Do you all invest in anything other than real estate? You've heard I'm trying to open some opportunities for multiple streams of income that are not in some of the traditional areas. I also do, obviously, public speaking. We'll have a book that comes out this year. Royalties from those books will certainly be something that will be a blessing. And so what kind of way do you maximize money or income? And if appropriate, how does it affect taxes, Pastor Dave?
One of the areas, real estate has been very helpful to us over the years, but you got to have a good renter. You got to have somebody who's going to pay their bills on time as opposed to chasing them down in a court of law. But it takes a lot of work in making sure the rental property is maintained properly and having a good relationship with the renter. So that's worked out very well for myself and my wife, and we're very appreciative that God has helped us in having good renters.
Well, that sounds good. We, in dealing with renters, though, as an organization, as a ministry, we have had everybody from some major manufacturers that work in the whole military area, very sophisticated, multi-million-dollar tenants, to, boom, they lose a contract, and you find yourself really into some challenges and replaced by someone that is not quite so, consistent. And we had a small business owner rent from us, and at the end of their contract, they slipped out in the heat of the night, and we find ourselves, trying to find $100-some thousand. Where was it going to come from? And they were small enough that suing them wasn't an option. You can't get money from where there isn't no money. And so real estate can have its own set of, what would you call it, risk as well.
Absolutely. So many other people that I've talked to that have rented homes have been in a court of law and have not done very well and lost lots of money. So you really have to prayerfully consider that as an investment if that works for you as an individual.
And understand that with any investment, there's risk.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people forget that. So, and I've seen that happen quite a bit, especially during the, shall we call it the real estate bust from 2007 through 2010, I guess 11. And a lot of people lost their investment in rental properties. But if you're good and you plan well with those properties, that it can work well, and does work well for a lot of people. So.
Yes, that is so true, because you hear some of the horror stories that are so bad. And so you have to really prayerfully know that God is helping you maintain a home, because it's a whole nother part-time job to be able to maintain that and keep that up.
That's interesting. Dr. DePass, would you weigh in on the savings investment side of things, or?
Okay, well, I would say that I think balance is very important. In other words, some real estate, some stocks, some IRAs. I've had very bad luck with stocks, so I'm out of that area mainly because investing in stocks, if you don't keep abreast of the market yourself, unless you're a big-time investor, usually the advisors will, neglect you, and you end up not knowing what's going on. So, I have something kind of interesting. I have a tree farm, and with tree farming, you harvest trees about every 18 years, every 30 years. But in the process of that long-term investment, the land appreciates. And then the land, my tree farm, I guess I must have purchased it decades ago for probably $100 an acre. Now it's worth $2,000 or $3,000 an acre. So in addition to getting returns periodically from the trees, the land appreciates. And so that's one area of the diversification. I just happen to have sort of groped into that, not with a lot of effort, and it worked out fine. And as you say, with the housing, it's something, again, you got to stay on top of the market. I had real estate that I could have sold 8 years ago and gotten a lot of money. The market is down now, so I have to wait another 8 years for it to come back up so I can get rid of it. But it's important. All these things. It's important to. The Bible says you should leave an inheritance for your children. Leaving something, owning something in these tangible assets like these are assets you are less likely to dispose of or to spend over time, and more than likely, like a tree farm, it'll be there for the kids and my grandkids. If I had it in stocks or IRAs, I probably would have drawn it out, spent it, bought a bigger house, a bigger car.
Yeah. Interesting. Wow, tree farm. For someone at my stage of life looking for streams of income, man, I got to wait 30 years for a return. I don't know about all that. You can, unless I'm thinking, okay, I'm really just going to pass this on to the next generation. But that's some interesting words of wisdom. And we really would like to dig down a little bit deeper in just a minute. We have one more segment of the program. And we do want to talk a little bit more about entrepreneurship and leadership. I think this is one of the answers for urban unemployment as well. Stay tuned for the Harry Jackson Show.
Hey, we're Casting Crowns.
And we know firsthand how destructive drug and alcohol abuse can be, but we also know that there is a way out.
My wife and kids had been gone for weeks, but it never really hit me how much my drinking had cost me until I woke up from an alcoholic-induced blackout on the kitchen floor in an empty house. The only evidence of even having a family was a few toys scattered on the floor. My name's Brian. When I first came into Teen Challenge, I was just trying to get my old life back when I suddenly realized that Jesus is who he says he is. And he reached in and changed my heart, and he changed my life.
If you or a loved one is struggling with an addiction, don't give up. Teen Challenge has helped thousands of teens and adults find true freedom through the power of Jesus Christ. You can find more information at 417-581-2181 or online at teenchallengeusa.com. You're listening to American Family Radio.
You're listening to the Ankerberg Minute with apologist and best-selling author Dr. John Ankerberg.
Some secular novels and films today refer to alternative stories of missing books of the Bible. How can we know the Bible contains only the books God wanted in the Bible and not others? One reason is that the 66 books of the Bible were written by people of God. Immediately after Moses penned the Torah, it was placed in the holy place of the tabernacle. In contrast, apocryphal books and so-called missing books of the Bible were often authored by unknown writers or people condemned by church leaders. We can stand confident that the books in our Bible have been confirmed by the Spirit of God through the supernatural miracles he allowed the prophets and apostles to perform, and by God's people who witnessed these acts and confirmed God's stamp of authority on their writings.
For additional resources on this topic, log on to johnankerberg.org.
Welcome back to the Harry Jackson Show. I'm your host, Harry Jackson. Joining me in the studio is James Fleming, who is an amazing, how should I call you, a financial consultant? Is that the word today?
That's a good word. I like that.
All right. And he works with preparing taxes and those kinds of things. Also, David Parlett, and he's got a story to tell us about his family riches and real estate in this area. And Dr. DePass, the first African-American to graduate with a PhD in economics from the great University of Maryland. And somebody was asking him before the break, they were alluding to how old he was. And I would summarize his statement that he's 3 years younger than dirt, and he is. That's just a joke, folks. But he's well preserved. I'll say that for him. And,
it's from chopping down all those trees.
Yes, chopping down those trees. But he's got a lot of wisdom in this whole financial realm, some of it through the studies and some through practicality. And we do appreciate him in the last segment talking about a tree farm, a 30-year-long investment wherein if you start young, and he started in the 50s investing in this, and there are ways that he has done well with it. And I think we can really make a change. Now, let me frame our discussion for a moment by saying this, a negative and a positive. Negative is just the other day in the Washington Post, there was a suit that has been recorded about a Ponzi scheme that cites one of the major pastors in Atlanta, and some of his parishioners were bitten by a Ponzi scheme. And a gentleman named Ephraim Taylor had been running a huge deficit in the kind of investment that he had been doing. And essentially, he was Barney Madoffing people on a minor scale. And so folk would get some return for a while, and eventually they lose everything they had. But what made it challenging is that the reference to be in the business came from the church. And because this man was supposed to be a member of a community and fellowship with the pastor, then it gave authenticity and credibility. And so there are problems with investments if we just, kind of blithely go along and don't investigate, don't use our discernment. But on the other hand, if you're going to turn around urban poverty and not have anybody else, how can I say, depend on anybody else. We're going to have to do something ourselves. We're living in the era, for those who are listening, 3 out of the 4 of us are African American who are sitting here, and in the stage where a black president has been elected for a second time, we're talking about and looking back at things like EEO, should equal employment opportunities be granted again? And I've just finished an article about that, and I've had to say it's going to be a hard sell in this kind of environment to tell people, now you need to have special set-asides and give special jobs to blacks and Hispanics and others when it looks like if we from here work hard enough, things can go our way, and somebody's going to have to think about starting businesses with the kind of returns that the overflow will begin to make the desert, if I can use it that way, blossom like a rose. We're going to have to make this kind of investment and take the risks that are commensurate with running and operating businesses. And so it's hard to say, well, we elected a president, but, I need help with getting my kids through school, and all those historic things are going to have to begin to be dealt with by our intact institutions such as our churches, etc. One thing that could happen for us in terms of small businesses is that business incubators could be developed. You have, in the case of Floyd Flake in New York City, he made a lot of real estate investments, which we'll talk about briefly, on behalf of the church. And some of the most expensive housing all in New York City is now owned by his church. And they've done well to help lift the whole neighborhood because the vision of one leadership team in a church impacting their whole city. Out with Charles Blake out in the greater L.A. area, they've done fantastic. Years ago, when I co-authored a book called High Impact African American Churches, we came to the conclusion that Bishop Blake, part of the Church of God in Christ, had a part of his business units, solar energy, that he was working with back in the day. And in the day I'm talking about back in the 1990s up into 2000, and long before President Obama was a twinkle in his political father's eye, we had someone that far thinking in the church community that was able to say, we're going to start you off in a janitorial business, give you skills to show up, work on time, and we're going to move you over to this other place, and under the umbrella of economic development in a church, we're going to transform the very nature of a community. So we can do it, folks. We can make a change in America through entrepreneurship. And I think minority folk have got to finally stop playing the victim and finally got to say, we're probably in the promised land if there's going to be one. And since we're in the promised land, and if we're not in the promised land, nobody else is going to believe we're not in the promised land. And they're going to say, you're on TV anchors, you've got multi-million-dollar football players, baseball players, all kind of other players. Now, how is it that you can't come out of some of this poverty and help your own family and friends and your community? And with that in mind, let's talk a little bit first to Pastor Parlett. And you are our token white reverend among us today.
Well, thank you, Bishop.
That's right. We're going to make you the true Oreo sandwich between these two black guys on the other side of you. But you were talking about your family had a huge tract of land that ultimately became a planned community in Maryland. Would you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, and I've been blessed to have both sets of families, father and mother, who come from large real estate, just simply because they were humble farmers and hunters and trappers, and they just took care of their grounds and maintained them. So one of my grandfathers actually was the president of the planning board of the entire city of Columbia. That was the first planned community or first planned city in the United States of America. And my other grandfather had 250 acres of ground that now one of Route 32 runs right through the middle of that up here in this Howard County area, and it was the very ground that we used to go swimming and going back fishing back through those very woods. But that was sold decades ago when my grandfather passed. But both our families were wise in keeping the monies and using the monies properly when the properties were sold. And so we just very blessed from generation to generation, at least to maintain. And even though they may not have made a whole lot of money, at least they knew what to do with the properties, with cattle, and with, as my father said, he was a hunter, trapper, and he has all those funny stories of catching and trapping animals. And he told us one story of a skunk that was not dead totally that he was skinning, and of course he ended up having to bury his clothes out in the woods.
Oh, yes, he pushed the stink button. So, Columbia, Maryland is a place in Maryland that now is relatively exclusive. It's suburban Baltimore. Your family owned the property.
Yeah, we owned a couple hundred, over 250 acres of just good old farmland. That's where we grew up, saw the cattle and the corn.
How did they come to choose that land to put Columbia as a development in the center? Obviously, other people's property was used, but the core of that city development and where the mall is and all the major streets, that was yours. How did the negotiations work?
Yeah, Rouse, of course, I'm guessing 50, 60 years ago, he had real estate people down in the state of Florida buying the farmers' property up here, so they really had no idea or concept that a planned city was being developed halfway between Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, Maryland. So they would sell their properties at some point, getting good money, but certainly not getting the maximum amount of money for this beautiful planned community up here in Howard County.
Wow. Okay, so you had it, you knew when to release it, and were there any funny stories attached to this transaction or the vision, or was it just a...
Well, I guess one of the blessings when my grandfather died, my Nana, who actually lived, my grandmother lived to be over 100 years old, she was able to use those monies to maintain her lifestyle for the rest of her life. And so that was very helpful. We all got a little bit of what was left over, is nice. But there were just nothing special other than being faithful to maintain what God had given us.
Well, I mean, that is maybe one of your life statements. You probably ought to write a book about that. You've exemplified in being with us around here, faithfulness on extreme, order yourself. But what you've been saying on all the financial shows is tithe, steward your money correctly, have unity in your family, and watch those goals. And you can be very secure no matter how modest your income is. And that's a message, I think, to everybody that's in the ghetto and everybody who is in the suburbs, alike in the shifting sands of American economics. We can still be stable and make it forward, move forward, and our kids can enjoy a great lifestyle if we'll do our part. Question for you, James, again, is filing jointly or separately, we talked about off the air. Should a married couple do that, especially one recently married? How does one know what to do about how we should file?
Okay. Very first thing is that I have found in most cases it is better to file jointly than to file separately. However, in filing separately may be of use to you, if you will, under certain circumstances. If one spouse has back taxes that they owe, or there's child support issues or other financial issues that may make it better going forward to file separately. What I typically do is that I will prepare the returns in both manners, and determine what's with the client.